I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony.
We call our first speaker to the podium to do an opening remarks and also outline the purpose of our engagement here. And that person is none other than the chairperson of the Heritage Council Board, Mr. Edgar Nelubalani, who will be telling us basically why we are here and what we seek to achieve by this gathering. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's welcome him to the podium. Thank you very much. The chair will also lead a moment of silence for our departed before we proceed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Greetings to you all. And as already mentioned, let us stand up to observe that moment of silence. It's been a very difficult week in that we have seen the loss of very key people in the history and as well as the heritage of our nation, from the Mandela family, the Pahad family just overnight. And we know that as we stand here, the memorials and burials happening at the same time. And so let us do that now. Thank you. Thank you so much. You may be seated. I have a formal speech that I'm going to go through, and thank you so much. Program Director, our honorable guest speaker, who's just stepped outside, Honorable Tokyo Sehwale, a veteran and former minister, former premier, successful businessman and a permanent activist for change, is also now acting as CEO of this wonderful precinct, and really appreciate the welcome and the hospitality as well. The leadership of Liliesleaf Trust that are here, including its chairperson, former president Mtlante, in absentia. We have in our midst also DDG and Dima from the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture. And thank you for being here on behalf of the department and the minister, and families and foundations of the esteemed Rivonia Trialists who are here. They will be introduced just after my speech. Esteemed members of our national orders, veterans of our liberation struggle, community of Rivonia, representatives of sister institutions, young and our future leaders, our youth, distinguished guests, fellow council members, some who are joining us and watching online, and all of you that are watching on Soweto television, you're most welcome. And also our ladies and gentlemen, everybody that is here, we appreciate you. And may I also say all protocols observed. We also have a member from the AU that is here. And thank you for coming here and spending the day with us. Truly appreciate. As Mr. Skhwale was saying earlier, that this actually are the origins of the AU as well. This is where things were discussed and fashioned out many years ago, and today we see the results. 60 years is a long time. You know, I'm standing here, and each time I come to this precinct, I try to go back in time. And 60 years ago, I was not yet born. I was just still a concept in the making. But I try to go back in time, and I try to imagine this farmhouse just standing here in the midst of an area that was not developed. And one of the family members was telling us how there was nothing, completely nothing. The only city of Joburg was as far as maybe Rivonia somewhere and Rosebank, but absolutely nothing this side. And it's been a long time, but you try to visualize and think about what has been going on, the secrecy of this place, and the plans that were being made, the imaginations, the deliberations, the brainstorming for the liberation of our people. This Heritage Month, we honor the exceptional Rivonia Trialists who were captured at this site on the 11th of July, 1963. Let us celebrate that moment. Thank you so much. Thank you, Liliesleaf Trust, for hosting us and agreeing to provide such a potent venue for this commemorative dialogue. The message could never have been the same at a different space at all. Just being here is a message enough. The National Heritage Council has a vision of a nation proud of its heritage, to engender a culture of patriotism, shared appreciation, collective responsibility for the conservation, management, and management of our heritage. It does this through heritage education and advocacy, research and knowledge production, coordination, transformation, funding, and the funding policy that we have. And those of you that are families, you must know that we are also a funding agency on heritage, and you need to focus as well on celebrating the various heritages of our fallen leaders in your own right. Today's session uses an intergenerational knowledge production approach, focusing on knowledge drawn from the liberation history and heritage, on knowledge drawn from, of our country and the continent. It is a retrospective and prospective, forward-looking celebratory session that draws inspiration from heroism and dedication of the Rivonia Trialists. It celebrates our cultural diversity and invites us to co-create a future that is worthy of the sacrifices with which it was attained. Your collective and diverse presence here affirms the profound significance of this day. As we conclude a Heritage Month this month on a high note, thank you for living your many and diverse responsibilities, especially for the families, to join us in marking not only Heritage Month, but also the 60 years of Rivonia Trial and the arrests that culminated in a prosperous destiny that gave us freedom. We enjoy the freedom that we enjoy today. We know how busy this week is for many of you and that you have vast responsibilities. Yet you hearkened to the clarion call, and we greatly appreciate you for that. So let me say the precursor to these arrests 60 years ago was manifested 2 years prior, when exceptionally brave and committed men and women of integrity realized that all the doors, number one, to peaceful attainment of freedom and coexistence were completely slammed shut. Number two, that all the doors of negotiations were locked. Number three, that there comes a time when the savage attacks have to be stopped, and the fire must be fought with fire. And that's what it had come to. And number four, the future generations faced a grim future of living in poverty, unfair and racist and racial discrimination, misery and oppression. unless there was somebody who was doing something about it. Repression or oppression is a very difficult thing. It comes to a point where you don't know if somebody will come from somewhere to save us from a situation. But there were men and women who took the risked their lives, their family, their livelihoods, and said, we'll talk together. We'll find a way for the future of this nation. They then vowed in the Mkonto manifesto that, I quote, there comes a time in life, in the life of any nation, when there remains only two choices, to submit or to fight.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And once again, let me also extend gratitude to those opening remarks that are very profound, including the video that has been shared here, that really foregrounds our purpose here, that it takes all of us here as a collective that is sitting here to promote and preserve our heritage for the benefit of the current and future generation. Ladies and gentlemen, without waste of time, let's proceed along our program. We have as our next speaker on the program, our CEO, Dr. Lukwareni, who will be ascending to the podium to introduce the families of the stalwarts that were eventually incarcerated on this particular site, which is very important, and also them being the icons, really, that ushered in this freedom that we are enjoying today. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maneti. Let me start by acknowledging the presence of the keynote speaker, Ntate Khwale and family. And we see that you also brought in a friend who was accused number 4. We appreciate that. Let me acknowledge our own chairperson, Mr. Neruvarani. Let me acknowledge the presence of the DDG, representing our parent department. We know you are an extremely busy person. We really appreciate that you are able to come here and welcome the families with us. Let me, more importantly, acknowledge the families that are here. We are aware that some of them couldn't make it because the Liberation family is basically in mourning, and that we understand. And above that, some of the members are basically living abroad. And so we are very pleased to see that amidst these busy schedules, and also for you revisiting this place with this very bad experience, but you put on brave faces and said, Siyapambili. Let me also acknowledge the presence of departments, Freedom Park, which is highly represented here, and we appreciate your presence, and any other people. But above all, let me appreciate the presence of the students, the interns from our own departments, my own colleagues. I think the knowledge that we are sharing here, we are basically just passing the baton to yourselves, because it is up to you now to engage on the next phase of liberation, where, as you know, there are people who even risk being electrocuted just to steal a pipe that they will sell for 200 rand. So that phase of mental liberation or economic or whatever you call it might be just what you need to take ahead. Obviously, I'm only given 10 minutes because my colleagues know that I've got a weakness of talking without ending. I think I got this good disease after visiting Cuba. So I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about.
Thank you very much, Program Director, veterans present and their descendants, our main speaker of the day, who is also a member of the Liliesleaf Board of Trustees, Mr. Tokyo Sekhwale, the management of Liliesleaf Heritage Site, the chairperson of Freedom Park, His Excellency Dr. Peggy Langa, the Chief Executive Officer of Freedom Park, Ms. Mufamadi, members of Council of Freedom Park present, the management of Freedom Park, the chairperson of the National Heritage Council, Mr. Nelu Valani, the Chief Executive Officer of the National Heritage Council, Dr. Lukwareni, the management of the National Heritage Council, chairpersons of councils of other government institutions present, representatives of government departments and institutions, officials of the Liliesleaf Heritage Site, Freedom Park, and the National Heritage Council, distinguished stakeholders, friends, ladies and gentlemen, and all protocol observed. This year's Heritage Month theme is dubbed Celebrating Our Cultural Diversity in a Democratic South Africa. Our theme envisages the display of our diverse cultures dating back to the meeting of both Occidental, Oriental with African cultures. As much as we know that the meeting of these cultures was largely characterized by conflict and to a very small degree, cooperation. Today we are happy that a conducive environment and platform has been set for these beautiful cultures to coexist through mutual respect and recognition, thanks to the advent of our democratic political dispensation in 1994. Let me hasten to say that it would not have been possible to have a democracy, let alone an appreciation of this mosaic of cultural diversity, if it was not for the sacrifices of the Rivonia group who looked dead in the face in their quest for liberation and freedom. It would not have been possible if the Rivonia stalwarts had relented on their fight against racial and ethnic divisions that the apartheid regime promoted to impede solidarity, unity, and diversity amongst the oppressed and the downtrodden people of this country. Today we are reaping the fruit of their supreme sacrifice. We welcome you all to today's reflective dialogue to mark 60 years of the Rivonia raid and trial as part of our Heritage Month activities. And please feel free, please feel at home, not only because I say so, but because of the journey Liliesleaf has navigated from the time it was acquired.
Comrade Steve Bantu Bonke Biko, the leader of the Black Consciousness Movement, who died like a dog at the hands of apartheid masters. An Afrikaner government, a racist government, they snuffed his life. Some people used to think that Biko himself, and we belonged to his organization as students in Black Consciousness, they thought he's against white people. He was once asked if he could identify, or what black people could identify as heroes amongst whites. His answer was a very simple one. Bram Fischer. Who is Bram Fischer? So admired by the leader of the Black Consciousness philosophy and movement. What type of temperature was within the body and soul of this person? What human being is this? An Afrikaner in South Africa, during a time when the Afrikaners had taken this country the other way, to be admired by Steve Biko. Much is made of the speech that Nelson Mandela gave, and you heard him. There comes a time in the life of a nation. I have fought this, I have fought that, against that, and against that. And then, of course, the famous words, an ideal for which I hope to live to its fruition, but also an ideal for which I am prepared to die. Who led Nelson Mandela in court to make those which reverberated the whole world, which virtually positioned Madiba higher than whatever he was before. The advocate, a senior counsel, a Queen's Counsel because he qualified as well abroad. The advocate who was in charge of the defense team at Rivonia was an Afrikaner, Bram Fischer. That same Afrikaner had also taken the lead, was in charge of the legal team during the 1956 treason trial, which saw 156 leaders being charged falsely for treason. The leader of that team was an Afrikaner. The ironies of South Africa. In an Afrikaner-dominated country with repression and oppression, discrimination and racism, in an Afrikaner court, a white court, white policemen, you saw them, white prosecutors, white judge, Justice the vet. Yet this side of the accused, there was an Afrikaner. Small wonder that Steve Biko understood that Bram Fischer was in a class of his own. Nelson Mandela has the following to say about Bram Fischer. He says, I fought for justice, for liberation, and for human rights in South Africa. But I never fought against my people. Bram Fischer fought for justice, for human rights, and liberation against his own people. There is no Afrikaner leader who has ever been humiliated and subjected to the kind of treatment until his death than Bram Fischer.
It is an overwhelming presentation by Honorable Tokyo Sikwale. And what he has taken us through, in the gender world, we call it cross-cutting. He has taken us through how he bonded with each and every prisoner that was in Robben Island, who started from Rivonia Trial. And, you know, the whole notion of VIP today for me has changed. If you are not a very important prisoner, I don't think you make much sense to me as a VIP. I have learned so much. The glue that he was in Robben Island does not come from just being a prisoner. It takes sheer commitment to work with people who are 10 years, 20 years older than you and bond in a very hostile environment. So that alone teaches us a lot. I want to take a few lessons that we need to take from his speech. The first one is that the Rivonia Trial, which our former President Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, and the 9 others and more heroes demonstrated that it was a trial of courage, conviction, and that it had a spirit. This spirit inspired the speech we've always listened to, where someone stands in a court, packed with oppressors, and says they are ready to die for a cause. This is a true calling of a spirit. The second thing I take from this statement is that there was serious pursuit of equality and justice, where in a court, as we've just been told, full of Europeans, full of all other international media coming to look at these Africans who think they can make a country free, without money, without guns, without education, without everything. I think it just demonstrated how Africans can dare things, how they can be resilient, how they have their own Ubuntu, which makes them dance in funerals, even when they are mourning. They know comes from that very deep thing we call value.
Now, colonialism doesn't mince its words when it does that. We think of Bantu education, you thought maybe it was just jealousy of white Africa. No, it was a systematic destruction of destroying people, kill their education, because they've changed the strategy of destroying people. Where they don't want to use guns, they use education as a means of communication, because communication is very, very important. They started from an early childhood level, education, the aid we were speaking about. Teach those people aid. They won't know that it's not aid, it's shekalo, it's potlongo or scam. Until it sinks in our minds and believe that it is true what they're telling us. That's colonial dominant education pitted amongst our people. Once they kill that thing, they bring in their own education. And you'll think that because they like us, they are able to... It's just that Afrikaners were not able to hide it. They call it Bantu education. Seriously, Bantu education. Kill the culture. Because that's the glue that keeps us together. So I must say, when Toki invited me, I said, okay, I'll come. In fact, he was commanding me. And I said, I'll come. Heritage, I'll come. Because that's very, very important. Many people have forgotten about our heritage. Now, and it's not possible to forget, because once you've got the gray matter here, that gray matter, there's a portion there that deals with memory. You'll see when you leave this place, you want to go to where you come from, your home. If you come from Soweto or wherever, you won't go to Pretoria and say, I'm going home. You'll be lost. It means there's something wrong with the memory here. Because you must drive straight to Soweto, where you come from. That's the responsibility of this gray matter, that portion of the gray matter that makes you not to forget. It's called memory. Heritage, when you publicize it, is part of conscientizing people about their memory. Pricking it so that, because the other forces are trying to make that portion forget, portion of the brain to forget. But I know it's difficult to make it forget. They'll try to come up with all sorts of education, material, themes, and what have you, until you believe that what they're doing is true. You can't change it, but we can. So heritage as a means of communication, as a means of educating, is very key, very key. There are people who are not going to like it because they must always oppose it. You can't run alone and think that there will be an opposite force against the process of what we call, this is what I call a renewal. So you have to come about with a number of outreach programs. It's just not outreach programs, it's a process of educating people or pricking their memory to remember where they come from and what they are capable of doing, and indeed they can do that.
We won't have time, Chair, to explain why this is important. If we want to teach our children and our students how to recall the past and how to make it dramatic and concrete. I have only 3 comments, Tokyo. Tokyo, I'm using Tokyo as a brand, affectionate name. Why you're called Tokyo, you're not in a hurry to divulge to us. But anyway, that's okay. I think one of the 3 things, colleagues, comrades, that came out today from Tokyo's rendition and the comments from my two colleagues. What is significant about Liliesleaf? What is significant about Robben Island? What is significant about the Kronstadt prison for women? What is significant about Albert Luthulus Museum is that there's a major shift in our thinking about each other in the world, shifting from oppositional to complementary differences. Being white, being black, being male, being female, the oppositions are not foundational. The oppositions are not primary. They are contingent and historical. We constructed them so they can be turned into complementary differences, in terms of which, in all our differences, we begin to recognize each other in each other. I think that's a brilliant wisdom, Tokyo, that Liliesleaf teaches, what your own life teaches. What do we do with this? As we're drawing up the strategy with the NHC and the Department of Sport and Culture, as we're drawing up the framework for nominating these sites, we had to say exactly what is the value of this project. And we came out with an important answer, that these national sites should be used as instruments for social cohesion and regional integrity. If you look at the NDP, there are about 10 outcomes there. One of the outcomes there is social cohesion, the other one is regional integration. The most strategic place to do that is through the work of the NEC and the Trust Program. It's important for us to acknowledge that this is a way in which we can dramatize the possibilities of working together in spite of our differences. It's a movement from apartheid thinking, a movement from colonial thinking, a movement into Ubuntu, into complementary differences, into equivalences. And that's where the renewal of the ANC must focus on.
Wondered when I was appointed as the chairperson of the South African Geographical Names Council, that what kind of a nation entrusts young people to take care of this task, which is transformative but very provoking. And I thought about ages. Dr. Manetsi was my classmate at the Robben Island Heritage Program years back, when this nation had an investment in knowing that this heritage will need to live on, such that it is infused, it is institutionalized in our knowledge systems, but also in our educational institutions. I came from the University of the Western Cape at the time and appreciated my first ride, which was not a joyful ride, to the island. And this is how I relate with this site and the Robben Island I went to. Having also had a conversation with Ntate Motsoaledi, who is an exact age with my father, the son who is here with us, I told him that when I landed in Robben Island, I would have thought as a young person it was going to give me a good spirit of triumph, and jubilation. But that was when I realized that this is a place of resilience, a place of souls that were broken. Because walking to the quarry, being part of the cells, unfortunately, I also worked during winter time there, and one could wonder especially in Tadesikwale when your soap did not work and it only had to take a shampoo to have a proper body bath, meaning that there was something very systematic about the intent of removing people. So I asked a lot of questions as a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, trying to understand the spatial place, but also the historical place that many people, even from where I come from, Ekrebecha, Port Elizabeth, former, Otatuyina, how did these people survive here? And when we started then recording the histories and working under Mr. Mpumlwana, who's now running our World Heritage program at NHC, at the education section, one looked at the relevance of the work we were doing. And it was not glorified work, but the connection that it took from a young person working under supervision, of course, because this required elements of debriefing. This was not enough for anyone to take a life story, because it is a life story to stay in one place for so long. And it took quite a lot of reflection and consciousness in knowing that every decision as a young person that I make on behalf of other South Africans, I should be held responsible when they are inorderly, but also unethical in many forms.
The program was going to be cancelled, so I've switched my computer off and put everything away. So I'll just be very, very brief. I've been asked to just give an overview of the legacy foundations of the Rivonia Trialists, and because of the short time, I only concentrated on the 8 Rivonia Trialists who were sentenced to life, and not the ones who were acquitted or who were not sentenced to life. I also didn't focus on the defense attorneys and advocates. So just to say that in terms of Nelson Mandela, there are 4 legacy foundations: the Nelson Mandela Foundation, the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, the Nelson Mandela Institute for Education and Rural Development, and the Mandela Rhodes Foundation. Comrade Kathrada has a foundation named after him. So does Comrade Mhlaba, the Raymond and Dideka Foundation, the June and Andrew Mlangeni Foundation. From all the Rivonia Trialists, 2 that I couldn't find any information on any foundation that they might have is the Ilyas Motsoaledi Foundation and the Governor Mbeki Foundation. Tata Sisulu has 2 institutions, the Walter Sisulu Cardiac Foundation and Education Fund, but there is no foundation named after him. So on that note, I think if the Motsoaledi family and the Mhlaba family, I have your contact details, and if there are foundations established in their names, please get in touch with me. I'd like to update that information. Just to say that 60 years on, the legacy of all the Rivonia Trialists is as much relevant today as it was when they were quite active. And it is the onus on young people today to take the legacy forward and to build and create a South Africa that they would be proud of. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I will be brief. So much has been said that I have absorbed, want to talk and think about for a long time. But there are 2 critical points that I would like to highlight now that came out of the mouth of our comrade Tokyo Sekwale and from the other discussants. That's the nature of freedom. I believe that freedom is real. Freedom can be breathed through the air. Freedom is tangible. It can be tasted. It is not an abstraction. And for that reason, we have had to fight for freedom in this country because freedom was worth fighting for, and we had to fight to achieve freedom. But furthermore, we have to keep fighting to guard our freedom, to live our freedom and not let it be eroded away from us. Those are the two brief points I want to make that I think summarize what was said today, the example of the lives of those, the Rivonia Trialists and their families. That, I hope, is a good summary of their message to us. And finally, let us always remember that we must honor those who wear blue overalls. Not only those who wore blue overalls in the early 1960s, but the workers of today who wear the blue overalls. This country is for their freedom too. Thank you very much.
My task really at the end of the program is to convey our sincere gratitude to, firstly, the Rivonia Trialists themselves and their families, and secondly, to the organizers of this event and the speakers, and lastly, also to convey our gratitudes to everyone else who's here. I did want to also highlight that one of the reasons our program director had said that we are responsible for managing the affairs of Liliesleaf is because Freedom Park and Liliesleaf are really siblings. If you look at it from the context of the resistance and liberation heritage route. So that is why you see us being involved in this aspect. So the first point of sharing our gratitude, being the Rivonia Trialists, we indeed say that Rivonia Trialists remain the epitome of the liberation struggle, not only within the confines of our borders, but also in the former frontline states such as Botswana and Zambia, to name just a few. South Africa, as a nation, we should all remain grateful to those who sacrificed their lives and were incarcerated here at Liliesleaf. For it is very clear for all to see that their incarceration was not in vain. As was already alluded to by Ntate Sekgwale, it gave birth to the current dispensation of a free and democratic society. From the presentation and from the speech of Ntate Sekgwale, one of the key lessons that I took out, especially when he was talking about the leaders who were here, something came to my mind about a statement that you find in one of the Asian books where it says, there is no greater love than a person that is ready to lay down their life for the life of others. What came to my mind was that there is no greater measure of love other than that. To be able to lay down your life, not for your own freedom, but for the freedom of others. You have been put in a position where you can secure your own freedom, your own comforts, but you are prepared to put that on hold in order for society to benefit. For me, I think it's one of the deep lessons that we take from the speech.
Thank you, Ntate Malapane. I think he has said really a mouthful. I can't overemphasize what he has said, but indeed also to extend a gratitude also to Freedom Park for keeping the flames burning here and the doors open of this important iconic site. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end now. And when we end this, let's end it with style. You know, it must be ended with flair. I can dance as well.
There's a train that comes from Namibia and Malawi. There's a train that comes from Zambia and Zimbabwe. There's a train that comes from Angola and Mozambique, from Lesotho, from Botswana, from Swaziland, from all the hinterlands of southern and central Africa. This train carries young and old African men who are conscripted to come and work on contract in the gold and mineral mines of Johannesburg and its surrounding metropoli. 16 hours or more a day for almost no pay. Deep, deep, deep down in the belly of the earth, when they are digging and drilling for that shiny, mighty, evasive stone, or when they dish that mishmash food into their iron plates with the iron shovel, or when they sit in their stinky